talk about DEI for a few moments and chat with you about how this has practically become a curse word for right-wing conservatives. DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in its most technical sense, DEI initiatives aim to promote representation and participation of diverse groups of people, including different races, genders, different abilities, and socioeconomic backgrounds, to include them within organizations and institutions. So these programs seek to ensure fairness and opportunities and to foster environments where all individuals feel valued and included. Specifically in workplaces, DEI often translate into policies and practices that mitigate bias, support underrepresented groups, and strive for a culture of inclusivity. Well, here come right-wing activists and conservatives, many of whom call themselves followers of Jesus Christ, and they oppose such. Imagine that. Imagine opposing diversity. Imagine opposing equity. Imagine opposing inclusion. This term DEI has been weaponized by right-wing activists and conservatives, many of whom are using the term as a stand-in for the N-word. Let's just call it what it is. They're itching to say the N-word, to call black people this, and many of them use this privately and really want to use it publicly. A coded term used to attack the achievements and the representation of black people. Oh, that's DEI. Didn't earn it, they say. For many of these people, DEI has become synonymous with unearned advantages supposedly given to minorities, particularly black people, and is treated as a symbol of everything wrong with woke culture, according to them. So DEI for them has devolved into a thinly veiled, and yes, very thinly veiled, replacement for racial slurs and stereotypes. And while DEI programs encompass more than just black people, I understand that. In the cultural lexicon of the right, the term is almost exclusively invoked to target black individuals. Anytime a black person makes a public mistake, anytime a black person becomes the subject of scrutiny, DEI is immediately weaponized to discredit their qualifications and achievements. And the implications are clear. These black people did not earn their positions. These black people were only given those positions because of their race. And this reveals the first major flaw in the conservative critique of DEI. It assumes that programs designed to level the playing field inherently disadvantage others, specifically them, white people. But such criticisms ignore the historical and systemic inequities. They always talk about history. They're trying to put the Bible into schools because they believe it talks about the history of this country, but they want to ignore the historical inequities that necessitated initiatives like DEI in the first place. Opposing DEI means opposing diversity. It means opposing equity and opposing inclusion, values that on their face are difficult to argue against. Yet here they are. And usually conservatives will often respond with the claims of merit. Merit, that's a big word of theirs. They must get it by merit. They argue that opportunities should be based solely on qualifications and achievements rather than efforts to address historical or systemic barriers. Now, this argument might hold water if the same critics, they themselves, were not actively supporting candidates and systems that thrive on nepotism, privilege, and mediocrity, and have very little to do with merit. The very ones that are yelling merit, they don't practice it, because these are the very ones that elevated Donald Trump to the highest office in the land for a second time after he became a convicted felon. After he bragged about sexually assaulting women, they put him in office for a second time. A man who prior to his first election into office had no political experience, unqualified, multiple failed businesses, unqualified, and a well-documented history of dishonesty, unqualified. So don't talk to me about merit. Any Donald Trump supporter, you sit down when it's time to talk about merit. You have nothing valuable to contribute to the discussion. His candidacy alone disqualifies anybody in the Republican Party from looking sideways at a black person talking about merit. You cannot make credible claims about merit. Trump supporters don't prioritize qualifications. They prioritize maintaining power, identity, and dominance. So I have a question. How can you criticize DEI initiatives under the banner of merit when they actually aim to broaden and access opportunity? And you claim that they're anti-merit. The hypocrisy is glaring. Or let's talk about the children of wealthy elites who gain access to prestigious schools and powerful positions due to legacy admissions and family connections. Yes, I'm talking about you, not merit. Where is the outrage over this systemic nepotism? When a white professional fails or makes a mistake, their individual error is scrutinized individually without calling into question the validity of the entire white race and their qualifications. But when a black professional falters, DEI is blamed as though their race rather than their individual actions is at fault. This is America 101, and it reveals a deeply ingrained bias, the belief that black people are inherently less capable and require special allowances to succeed. And this bias is not new and it's not isolated. Consider the historical exclusion of black athletes from certain positions, like quarterback in professional football. For decades, generations, the belief was that black players lacked the intelligence to play the position of quarterback. This is a documented belief, and it has only been through the undeniable success and dominance of black quarterbacks over the generations that this myth has begun to erode. I said begun. Or consider the example of black pilots in the American aviation industry. Now, the percentage of black pilots remains very small, but the qualifications required to become a commercial pilot are stringent and uniform across all races. But if you listen to these DEI keyboard warriors, they would have you believe that a black pilot did not go through the same training as a white pilot. And the moment a black pilot is involved in some type of incident or accident, these DEI keyboard warriors make race the scapegoat. Meanwhile, what do the statistics say? The statistics say the overwhelming majority of aviation accidents and incidents are committed by white pilots, white male pilots, and are attributed to individual factors like fatigue or training deficiencies rather than systemic favoritism. But this disparity in the perception underscores the perniciousness of the anti-DEI rhetoric. It's the perception about black people who are in the flight deck, because the perception has seeped into what is your reality. The vilification of DEI hides a truth that all black people in America know and have understood for centuries. Black individuals must work harder to achieve the same recognition as their white counterparts. I would not expect anyone that's not black to understand this. Contrary to the conservative narrative, black professionals are not handed opportunities on a silver platter. They are often held to higher standards, facing systemic barriers and biases that their white colleagues do not face. And this is a lesson that is passed down through generations. In America, to succeed, you gotta be better, not equal. This reality is in direct opposition to the myth of reverse racism perpetrated by the right. The idea that DEI initiatives disadvantage white people is as fictitious as any fairy tale. If you believe in reverse racism, I have a story I'd like to tell you about Santa Claus and some reindeer. because it's just as fanciful. It's a narrative that gains traction because it taps into white fears of losing dominance in a diversifying society. Now, smart organizations and businesses, including the Church of Jesus Christ, will recognize that diversity, equity, and inclusion are not about lowering standards, but enriching perspectives. A diverse workforce brings a varied experience base and ideas to the table, and it fosters innovation and better decision making. Organizations that embrace DEI are not compromising on qualifications. They are expanding their talent pools to reflect the reality of a globalized and diverse workforce and world. This anti-DEI rhetoric is not just harmful then to minorities, but it's a detriment to the organizations and institutions themselves that succumb to it. And by rejecting DEI, these entities close themselves off from the benefits of true representation and inclusivity and become stagnant in an increasingly dynamic and interconnected world. So the transformation of DEI into a conservative curse word is part of a broader cultural strategy by them to stroke fear and resentment. Terms like woke, DEI, CRT have become coded language for denigrating Black people and their accomplishments and their qualifications without overtly using racial slurs. But these terms, while more socially acceptable, carry the same discriminatory intent. It's the same old racism, just in a new package with new verbiage. The conservative war on DEI is not about merit or fairness. It's about preserving a status quo that prioritizes white dominance under the guise of equality. DEI is not the problem. CRT is not the problem. Wokeism is not the problem. The problem lies with those who resist because they see equity as a threat to their unearned privileges. And as followers of Jesus Christ in a diverse society of which we are members, it is incumbent upon each of us to reject these divisive narratives and advocate for a future where all individuals are valued and included for who they are and for what they bring to the table, not despite it.